Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
I almost said the Dark Pixel podcast because we had just been talking about Dark Pixel like a few seconds before that. It was a close shave. I almost said it. I didn't say it. This is the State of the Arc podcast. Today we're going to be talking about non-linear storytelling and the challenges that come with that, especially in video games. But before then, we've had a lot of news stories this week that we want to touch on. First of all, this is a warning to any of you, and there are a number of you who follow our channel who are into Kingdom Hearts. Kason's done some Kingdom Hearts content once or twice in the past.
Once or twice.
and
they are always so well received.
And they are. Kingdom Hearts 3 has leaked. The game is not supposed to be going on sale till the 25th of January or somewhere thereabouts. But I think about 30 copies of the game were apparently stolen, and the dude has sold them. I'm gonna
was this in Japan, or was this American? Or
I actually don't know. Let's see if we can find out. Here's the article I'm looking at. It says, Square Enix hotly anticipated Kingdom Hearts 3 isn't supposed to be on the market until January 25th, 2019, but some copies have already made it to market, leading fans to brace themselves for a deluge of early spoilers. On Sunday, the director of Kingdom Hearts 3, Tetsuya Nomura, issued a statement via Twitter confirming the leaks as legitimate, but also assured fans that the game's most surprising twists were spoiler safe. I don't know how he knows this.
What?
Well, let's see if he says anything about that. The game's
Did the
epilogue,
version of the games that got leaked, were they not the final versions? I wonder.
Maybe it requires an update. I don't know. He says the article goes on to say, the game's epilogue and secret movie are not included in the disc release and will be patched into the game at a later date.
Oh. So
Okay.
That's like DLC, like day one DLC, basically.
Kind of. It at least seems that way. Here's the statement.
That's
Nomura.
an interesting way of doing things, actually.
It says, we're aware that a small portion of Kingdom Hearts 3 has been circulating online before its official release. We are also aware as to how this has all happened. We're sorry to see this cause concern amongst our fans who are excited for the release. The whole team has been working together since yesterday night, Japan time, to investigate what we can do to better this situation. But first, we would like to ask that you do not share these videos. The game's epilogue and secret movie, which are the biggest spoilers in this game, are planned to be released at a later date just in case, so they will not be shown before the game's release. We want everyone to be able to equally experience the full game after its release, so we ask for your continued support on this matter. We're also very grateful that our fans have been warning each other already about spoilers. Thank you very much. We're 1 month out from the release. Let's enjoy the game together when it releases on January 29th.
Do you know what really, really sucks?
Ooh, that says 29th. He says 29th, 2019, but she says 25th. I don't know who to trust. Do I trust Nomura or do I trust this girl from Mashable?
We could just look up Kingdom Hearts.
This girl on Mashable lying to us?
They're all lying. Get your stories straight, people. January 29th. It comes out 29th, not
okay,
25th.
29th. She was wrong. I should trust Nomura. Trust Nomura. That's what we take. That's the moral of the story.
Okay, this is insane. Kingdom Hearts 3 release. I typed into Google. The first thing that shows up, January 29th. Then I look and, on the side, Google gives you a little like sidebar sometimes, like profiling. Yep. It says initial release date, January 25th.
Maybe.
Is it 25th in Japan?
Who do I trust, dude?
And 29th in America? It could be that Japan gets it a few days before us.
I do not want to show up at the store on the 25th and have wasted my time. Someone better get this straight. Actually,
straighten us out, people. Do you guys have any idea why this discrepancy exists?
I have no idea if I'm going to buy it or not. But
in Japan and Asian countries, January 25th and the 29th elsewhere. So Japan gets it 4 days before we do.
The Japanese are going to spoil it for us, dude. They're going to get it 4 days in advance. They're going to see the epilogue. They're going to see the secret
all
movie.
Of your Japanese friends.
They're going to come into the chats of all the American streamers and spoil everything, dude.
Yeah. 4 days. Oof. A lot can happen in 4 days. Be careful, people.
I know. So the reason I caught wind of this was mostly because Super Butterbuns tweeted it like yesterday.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how she's going to ban or mute a certain number of keywords from her chat, so that if somebody says this or that, like, it won't go in there. It's great that you're doing that, but if someone really wants to spoil it, like, they're gonna find a way. So the message should be, don't engage.
We dealt with this in the Final Fantasy 15. It got leaked too. And,
yes. So, because let's say you ban the term Sora from your chat, right? Yeah. All the person has to do is spell Sora with a 0 and a 4, and they can still say what they want to say, right? Like that.
I learned that playing RuneScape, because they banned swear words in RuneScape, but I would just type them with, like, I just, like, spell them wrong.
Exactly. So the thing I would do, especially since this is a game that people have been waiting for 10 plus years, is watch videos from people you trust. Don't go into the comments section. Yeah. Don't look at the chat. Don't participate in the chat on streams, and just for the most part avoid forums. Avoid.
This is what I do anytime something big comes out that I care about. I'm like, I go dark for a long time.
Just protect yourself, because because your favorite streamer has banned a list of 90 keywords and is doing all they can to try and keep people from saying stuff, it does not mean it's going to happen. Be careful. We had 2 or 3 mods who were closely watching the chat on that day. We did that full day stream before the release of FF15.
But even still, stuff got up even for just like 10 seconds, and then it's like
Landon wasn't able to get back from, I think he was still in Denver or whatever.
Oh yeah, he was gone. Yeah,
and so he was watching too, specifically.
That's
for
right.
Spoilers,
he was over in Denver. Yeah,
and trying to, like, keep people out of the chat, and you can't. Like, some people
I
are
banned
still
like 30 people that day, and I was like, man, I was hoping I could unban some people after, because I was like 0 tolerance. Like, somebody even put a Final Fantasy 7 spoiler in there just to be funny, because we were like, no spoilers, and they put a 7, and I banned him immediately. And then I tried to find a list, because when you block people, there's a list, and you can see it. I tried to find a list of people I'd banned so that I could unban a few people, because I was just ruthless. I was like, immediately, drop of the hat, you banned. And you can't actually unban people. So I'm like, whoops. Some of our subscribers got banned that
There isn't a place in the chat on YouTube where you can do that.
Yeah.
But there is a place hidden in the channel where you can see the list of people you've banned.
Really? Can you unban them?
Yes. There's just like a little X next to their name. If you press it, it just deletes them out of the banned list.
Okay.
So
well,
there's a number of people in there. There's a lot, and I'm assuming probably most of them came from
that. They probably don't even care about us anymore.
Probably not. And a lot of them
probably like, oh, dude, I found this cool channel called Resonant Arc.
Well, and a lot of them wouldn't even know, because unless they're banned out of the chat, because you would type in the chat and not see your name come in the chat. But in comment sections, you're just hidden, so you can type and enter, and you think that you're chatting, or sending a comment, but no one else sees it.
That's a good way to do it. I like that.
That's the way it works on YouTube. So, anyways, watch out.
Be careful
if you are excited for the release of Kingdom Hearts 3. Many copies of the game have been leaked. Just be aware. Protect yourself.
That's frustrating.
Okay, second thing I wanted to look at. There is a cross-promotion collaboration project for Monster Hunter World and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
That's pretty
cool. This is a fetching collaboration that makes sense, right?
Yeah, talk about Witchers hunt monsters.
There's some weird collaborations I've seen out there that make me go like, huh? Like, why? Yeah. But this one, of all the ones I've seen, this one makes sense. And I've been meaning to play Monster Hunter World.
Yeah, me too.
For a while. Just haven't had time, haven't made time for it. But now I'm really going to do it, because this is freaking awesome. Capcom announced during its Monster Hunter World Special Developer Update broadcast today that a collaboration with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is bringing Geralt of Rivia to the hunt in early 2019. Here's a new trailer for the collaboration. I'll put this up for a minute. But yeah, freaking stoked for this. Monster Hunter World was one of the games I was most impressed with last time I went to E3. Because I didn't go last year, but the year before that, they were showing Monster Hunter 3 in a couple of different places. You could go in with like the developers, and they'd sort of like play through a section. And like that year at E3, I think that, and then what was it, Mario plus Rabbids, were
Oh,
the two
yeah.
games I was most impressed by at E3, and I didn't play either of those games when they released.
What the fetch?
But they were the two that I was most stoked about while I was there.
That's funny.
But now I think I'm finally going to go ahead and jump in and play this game. So that's coming in 2019. Any of you who are Witcher fans, Monster Hunter fans, you get a collaboration that actually makes sense for once. Freaking stoked. It looks awesome.
Congrats.
Freaking sweet. Okay, so we're moving on from that to episode Ardyn, Prologue, teaser. Okay, so the Prologue, episode Ardyn Prologue, right, is not the actual downloadable DLC.
It's not episode Ardyn.
It's a little anime.
A prologue, yeah.
That
it's just
serves as a prologue to...
What's it
the
going to be
actual
like?
game
Is
you're
it
gonna
like a movie, or is it like going to be a couple episodes like Brotherhood?
I don't think it'll be a couple. I think it'll just be one.
One episode?
So here's what I was hoping when I heard that they were doing Ardyn DLC, right? What I was hoping is that they were going to go back into his time period and that you would be able to play in that sort of Renaissance-esque world.
Oh, they'd have had to have designed a whole new thing, though.
That's what I was hoping because
Me
of
too.
all the time that was being spent developing this, right? Like, they announced it quite a long time ago, and I was hoping that they were designing maybe like an hour or two long little thing, kind of like episode Ignis was, where they sort of built out new sections.
Built a new thing. That's true, yeah.
And they would be kind of like that. That's not the case. Episode Ardyn, the DLC, is going to take place around the time of when King Regis was younger, still like fully capable with his using the glaive weapons. I forget what they're called. And Noctis would have been very young at this time. And so which is weird. It's a weird choice for a couple of reasons. One, it feels strange that Regis doesn't recognize Ardyn necessarily in like Kingsglaive. Remember when Ardyn comes and he's like, "Oh, venerable whatever," and he's like talking to Regis. And Regis talks with him as if he knows that he's the, what do you call it, Chancellor of Niflheim or whatever, like knows of him, but not that he knows him personally, right? But in this episode Ardyn DLC, like the trailer for it, they show him fighting him. So like Regis and Ardyn like face off with like the glaive weapons.
What?
Right? So that to me was like, I lost some interest in it after seeing that. But what my guess is, and we don't get to see much. I mean, I'll pull it up here, the trailer for it, right? It seems to me like maybe what this prologue thing will be is a bit more information about what happened in the past during Ardyn's time.
So they'll take care of that in the anime, and then the actual gameplay is going to be more recent.
That's my guess, just based on the little that were actually shown here, because it seems to show him struggling with the Star Scourge within him. It seems like the curse inside of him, but you don't really see much there, right? So I don't know. I have no idea, but it seems to me like that's kind of a logical thing to assume that they're going to do, that they'll show the part that I actually cared to know more about in that little anime, and then you'll play this little section where he's like released from his prison that he's been in for hundreds of years or whatever, and then he immediately goes after revenge and I would assume fails, and then sort of like slow builds to come back and take revenge again during the course of the main game. I don't know. But I was a little bit disappointed. I found out that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, interesting.
Anyways, that's coming 2019. Look forward to it if you care. Let's talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. This is the last part of the stories from this week.
This is the best thing ever. So many people were wondering if it was real or not when the trailer or when the poster first showed up.
Yeah, I had no idea that a Sonic the Hedgehog movie was being made at all. I did not know this.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's a live-action film. So
it's like Detective Pikachu.
I guess there you go. That actually is a good comparison.
I think
but
it's yeah.
Pikachu looks whack in that movie too, man.
Yeah,
like,
he does.
It doesn't look right. It looks weird.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. Actually, now that you bring that up, I guess I can sort of see it. There must have been some industry trend or something that the studios looked at
this
and was like, oh, a Pokemon live action movie is being made. Let's do a Sonic one. Or I could see that being the rationale behind the decision to go ahead and try something like this. That's a good point.
Sonic doesn't work. Did Sonic ever around like real people ever?
The show is it's very cartoony. You see, like is it Dr. Wily?
Or in the games? Okay.
No, Dr. Wily. Dr. Wily is
human.
It's Robotnik. Robotnik, is that what it is?
Yeah,
Robotnik
and the glasses.
Yeah, Dr. Eggman.
The big dude, Eggman. That's it, Eggman. Yeah, the big guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, I guess there are a few humans around,
but they're very cartoonized, I guess. Like the entire art design of Sonic the Hedgehog is just grotesque.
Yeah.
When you try to like apply that to like a realistic look, and even just seeing the outline, the silhouette of this character, it's just like, what the fetch? That is disturbing.
It's weird because Sonic, how tall is he? Like, this is one of the funny things when I played Mario Odyssey. When you have real human-ish looking people in Mario Odyssey, Super Mario is half their size. Mm-hmm. It would be weird for his proportions if he was actually as tall as all those people, right? Mario's actually super short. But I never thought that back when I was playing Mario, and you get the mushrooms and you get bigger, you're still only half the size of an adult human. I didn't know that. Unless Mario doesn't have the whole mushroom thing anymore. I don't know. It's weird. Something's up with that. But I imagine Sonic being the same, about 3 feet tall. And he's going to be with all these people. It's going to be weird. Yeah.
So one thing that did give me some pause as to just dismissing this entirely was the fact that it's being produced by Tim Miller, who was the director of Deadpool. So there could be a sort of... Well,
that's funny, because the voice of Pikachu in Detective Pikachu is Ryan Reynolds, right?
Yep, exactly right.
Which is, okay, well...
So, anyways...
There's a connection there. I bet you there is.
There could be a tongue-in-cheek element to the tone of the film that might make it work. I don't know. But,
Sonic has an attitude, don't forget, so...
That's very true. Tim Miller says that was always stage one of adapting it to what the real world is and what the real animal would look like. It would be weird, and it would feel like he was running around nude if it was some sort of otter-like thing. He's talking about adding the fur to it. It was always for us fur, and we never considered anything different. It's part of what integrates him into the real world and makes him a real creature. There was a poster, apparently, that was leaked. I'm looking at it now.
I saw two. I saw the one with the legs, and then the one where you see his fur and he's silhouetted.
Yeah, so the one with the fur is silhouetted, right? Let's see I thought I could pull up a larger picture of this. Maybe I have to actually go to the tweet. But if you look at it... Anyways, it's kind of hard to see. It's a little small. But you can see the poster, and he's just got his legs like out as he's like coming down towards the Golden Gate Bridge, looks like. I don't know, man. It looks freaking weird.
He is a naked like thing. Like
it looks really weird to me.
I know.
And it makes me question the decision to do live action. Like, who called for this?
Yeah.
Who called for a live action Sonic the Hedgehog? Why? Why do we need that?
he's dark and he's fast.
Like, why not just make it like a Pixar like sort of, CG movie? I don't. Yeah. It's perfect for that. Why do live action? I don't get it. Rob saying, kill it with fire. Yeah.
Kill it.
What's up, Mage 14? How's it going? Anyways, yeah. I don't know what to think about that. It just looks strange. And it brings to mind, we've had some discussions in the past about what properties should or should not be made into live action. We've talked about Zelda before, like whether or not Zelda should be made live action.
It would be very difficult.
To an even lesser degree. Far lesser degree.
Far lesser, because he's a person.
Even still, I feel reservations about The Legend of Zelda being made live action. We've talked about doing one in the past. We came up with what we thought would be some good ideas for how to do that.
But who knows execution wise?
Yeah, like how that would have been received.
Could we have really pulled it off? And I maybe, but probably not, because this is hard.
Trying to imagine even a creature in Zelda like a Goron in live action is hard for me to like pull off right, to make it look realistic, because it's always had that anime aesthetic or the cell shaded aesthetic, which is like there's a way the faces are sort of constructed in the proportions of eyes and things of that nature that it just, and it's actually the same reason why I don't like the look of Advent Children, and I prefer the look of Last Order, which is the anime sort of like retelling of the Nibelheim incident.
Yeah.
Last Order, I think, aesthetically looks perfect. It's like the best version of Final Fantasy VII from a visual standpoint that I've seen. I feel like Final Fantasy VII is an anime. It was birthed. It was conceived with that look in mind. And so when you try to like bring a cartoon or an anime into the real world, it just falls apart. The hair, the eyes, like it's just very hard to balance the proportions there and try to make that look realistic. And this, to a far greater extent than something like Final Fantasy VII or The Legend of Zelda, is just not going to work, in my opinion. It's don't do this. Why are you doing this? I don't even like the way Pikachu looks in Detective Pikachu. I think he looks weird as fed.
He looks weird because of the fur. It's the same thing with Sonic. It's like you've got Pikachu, he's this little ball, and you can't tell if it's fur or not, right? Because it's just smooth. And then you try and make it in real life, and it's like, well, it has to be fur because he's kind of like a cat or something, I guess. And the fur, that somebody brought up the uncanny valley earlier, like that's totally what it is. It looks too real. It's like, whoa, this isn't Pikachu anymore, stop. And then with Ryan Reynolds' voice, that makes it even more creepy. It's just like, no, this is not Pikachu.
Well, and the attempt at balance, right, between this cartoon original design and then like trying to make it fit in or blend into a real environment
with
creates
the world.
It accomplishes neither.
Exactly.
It doesn't look right because it's uncanny from the cartoon, but it also doesn't look real. It doesn't look real at all. Like Pikachu does not look like a real living thing there in the environment in any of those shots, in my opinion. He still looks like just this creepy, like weird thing that stands out and doesn't feel like it fits there. And this looks even freaking crazier and worse from what I can see, even just from the silhouette. It's just like, what the bitch?
It's gonna be better than the next Star Wars movie. That's all I know.
The world of Pokemon at least has like cities that resemble the real world and societies and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
like
villages and houses. Yeah.
And the world of Sonic, from what I can tell from the video games, is much more of like a... I mean, it has like architecture. You go into like,
sometimes there's a highway going.
Yeah, like a highway or something like that.
Or something.
It's kind of like Mega Man, though. Like there's a very like... It still feels very removed from anything realistic in its designs.
Except there's that one level in Sonic Adventure 2... or Sonic Adventure, the one for the GameCube with the chows, where you're running around at the speed of sound. It's playing that rock song, the and he's like, you're flipping cars up when you run into cars. They like flip around, and it's like actually a city. It's called Escape from the City, I think.
I haven't played that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my only reference is basically the Sega Genesis. Sonic
the original.
So,
yeah.
With like
Sonic
all the
Adventure
animals,
2 did something like that, but there weren't any people.
Yeah. Anyways, it's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think about it. We'll see how it goes. Tim Miller seems like a pretty competent dude, but we'll see what they do with it.
We'll see, man.
Okay. Let's move into our main topic for this week. This was actually one of the questions from Patreon. I decided to make it a main topic because it was a really interesting question. And it was not something that was on our list of topics we were thinking of discussing, but as soon as I read it, I was like, dude, that should totally be one that we could make a video on, possibly. So, it comes from Joshua OG. Says, nonlinear storytelling is a big challenge, mostly unique to video games. What do you guys think about the kind of non-linear storytelling where there are multiple endings, multiple viewpoints, and also has non-linear story progression? He points to Blaze Blue, Continuum, Shift, Nier Automata. Unfortunately, I've only played one of those three, and it is Nier Automata, but I can talk about that. What challenges do you think are unique to this kind of almost free-form structure that still needs to tell a complete story somehow? Do you have any thoughts on that before I kind of move over to this article?
Non-linear stuff, well, I guess just like the reason non-linear doesn't work in video games, generally speaking, is because in a video game, you're progressing. You're always going from one thing to the next thing. And especially in like RPGs, you're leveling up. And to all of a sudden step to a different point within the story, if you're still seeing the same character, there's a big question about what do you do with that, right? Is your character still, what level is your character if you're going to be telling the story out of order a little bit? And if you have multiple storylines happening, which people bring up Nier Automata, and also to maybe a lesser degree with that is Birth by Sleep, the Kingdom Hearts game. You just have to make them into separate games, almost like separate playthrough. Like you have to play a whole amount once, and then you have to go back and play the whole amount like again as a different character or something like that. That seems to be the way that a lot of video games kind of get around that, because having an actual story that goes back and forth, it's confusing. It's just really difficult.
Yeah, Rob says the topic goes very well with The Last Wish, and that was what I was going to bring up, right? I think the key difference between nonlinear storytelling in film or in a novel versus a video game is the element of choice, especially if it is broken up into sort of an open world structure. Let's say something like Breath of the Wild, where you can tackle any of those they're not temples. What are they called? The beasts, the divine beasts.
Oh, beasts. Yeah.
In whatever order you want. You can collect the pieces of the story in whatever order you want, essentially. And that can all come together in very different ways, depending on who is playing and where they choose to go first and what they choose to do. And not so coincidentally, the story in that game is very... Well, I think that... I don't want to say it's bad. I want to say that it feels broken. It feels... It feels like it's not cohesive. It doesn't come together. It's not told very well, in my opinion. Right. And that is, I think, the best example I can think of why the open world structure, without any limitations on it, right? Because there are a lot of games that are open world, but they're not fully open world. You can't actually go fight the final boss right off the bat if you wanted to, right? You'd have to you'd find some roadblocks in the way that would sort of funnel you toward a story beat here, which will then open up this area, and then you can go into here. Most games, even though they are open, their maps are open, and they give you some time. Okay, now you can go and do side quests if you want, and
right.
They're not truly
like a break.
Yeah, they're not truly open world in the same way that Breath of the Wild is, in that there is nothing holding you back from doing basically anything you want after you leave the plateau in the beginning. So, anyways, there's so many variables, many variables, especially when you introduce any element of choice for the narrative. I'm actually hearing music behind me. Let me go close the door real quick.
I wanted to, sure. I want to talk about Breath of the Wild a little bit more. Talking about the divine beast, because the first are you back on?
I'm back on.
The first divine beast that you take on in Breath of the Wild is actually pretty difficult, right?
Yeah.
But because they don't know which one you're going to go to first, and you can literally go wherever you want, you have a hard time on the first divine beast. The second divine beast, you kind of get what's going on now, and you understand how to move all the elements and stuff. And it still may take a while, but you figure that out. By the third and fourth are actually, they're like easy. Because there's no like level, there's no standard of difficulty amongst all four. They have to all be basically the same level of difficulty, but you are progressing in the game as you go. And so whichever one you do first is going to be hard, the next one will be easy, and the last two are going to be extremely easy because you're well beyond where the game developers could have known you would be at that point going into that part of the game. So that's an issue, I think. I like in most Zelda games, the dungeons get progressively harder in different ways. And
this same principle,
like that in Breath of the Wild.
This same principle you're talking about applies to storytelling too. Like if you can't account for what has the player actually done before arriving
you don't
here,
know,
right? How do you provide information in a flow or in a way to where you can make connections, you can set up exposition, you can then, build up towards a climax, and then you can resolve that if you have no idea what information the player has coming into that story beat? It's like if you opened up a novel, let's say I opened up The Last Wish, which is a non-linear novel, by the way, which is why Rob was bringing it up, right? This story is told non-linearly. But if I open up to just off the bat, page 215, and I start reading right here, well, what is it? Guess. I haven't the faintest idea, The Witcher said. Not even I just start reading from right there. I have no context whatsoever. Yeah. How could you plan for that when you're telling a story as to like, oh, I'm going to start over here at the end. I'm going to read this one first. And it's like, even in this non-linear story, right, where he jumps between the current time period and then kind of goes back and tells a story from his past and then comes back to the current time period and then goes back and tells a story from the past. All of those were chosen very deliberately so that you'll have key context about the character and his relationships with people and all that, which you will need to like really fully appreciate the story being told at any point you are at in it. I have an article here. This is on GameCareerGuide.com, right? And I thought that this did a really good job of explaining this issue and the number of variables involved. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will provide a link to this in the description on YouTube. We don't need to go over what a linear and non-linear narrative is. I think we all understand the difference between the two. But he goes in here into the types of non-linear storytelling. Whoops, let me be in the correct thing when I do this. Says there are two main categories of non-linear games, and sometimes a combination of both: open world and branching. Open world often means the player is able to encounter different parts of the overall story in whatever order they choose. And that's the element here that separates it, like I was saying, from the way the Last Wish is written, or from the way some films I'll be bringing up here in a minute handle it in nonlinear storytelling in their movies. You don't have a choice. I guess you kind of do. Like, you could fast forward to the middle of the movie if you wanted to, or open the book at a random page and start reading. But that's not the same thing. I don't think. That's not the intended way of experiencing it. In the same way that the intended experience in an open world game is for you to make a choice about where you start and where you go first and that sort of thing, right? Like Breath of the Wild, like we were saying. They intended for you to get off that plateau and point in the direction you choose and go there and do it however you want. So they're trying to account for all of the variables the player might choose in how they balance the game and so forth, and how they reveal the story. Okay, he says, in whatever order they choose, or the player is able to access smaller, more isolated side stories in whatever order they choose. Think of quests in World of Warcraft or missions in Grand Theft Auto 3. So he's got a little graph here showing the open world and all these plot points. And it's like you could go here, 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 anyone you want. And the more there are, the more variables there are in the order you choose, right? So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dots. And if I choose the top right dot first, but then I go to the one in kind of the middle bottom next, there were 6 other branches there that someone else could have chosen to go to first, right? And that just exponentially increases the number of different ways that you can approach this, right? It gets out of hand really fast. Coming down here, he says, branching nonlinear stories are generally thought of as one of two styles. 1, a tree that branches out with different endpoints, or 2, plot points that converge or diverge like parallel roads to the same destination. The first option is much more difficult to implement due to programming and asset management challenges. That's the key, I think, because it's very hard to tell a cohesive story in this sort of the open world method, because how do you account for where they go first and what information they have? You get kind of a Breath of the Wild situation. In the branching narrative side, you're still trying to guide them a little bit more, but you every time you have a branch or a choice that branches the story, you've basically doubled, in a sense, you've almost doubled the story that you have to write. Because if I choose to go this way, I have to write a whole story that is based on the one choice.
Now, I also have to for you, Mike. Is this the problem that George R.R. Martin has run into in Game of Thrones?
To some extent, yeah. I mean, that's why he's struggling with finishing this next book, because he's actually
created a ton of work for himself by having so many different storylines.
He's writing 7 novels for all these different characters he's got, right? So it's not one story; it's a whole lot, kind of intermixed into one, and that is a good parallel to how out of hand branching narratives can become as well, and the reason why. You run into, even in AAA games with enormous budgets and tons of resources and people working on them, this is why you get a situation like Mass Effect 3, where you thought your choices were going to lead to a branch of something like 16 endings, but really it's only 3. They kind of converge them all into just these one of 3 things.
Because it would have been insane for them to have actually carried it out the way you thought they were going to be able to do.
It's just completely out of hand. The amount of time, the amount of thought to make each one of those resolute and satisfying, and to take the character into a totally different place or a totally different situation. It's just not it's not reasonable to assume that you can do that. Which is why games like Radiant Historia, they kind of handle it more like choose your own adventure stories, where mostly you make a choice and the story just ends at that choice if it's a bad choice. It's like, I choose this and that leads to a death or to a failure or to something bad happening. Go back and now choose the other one.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's way easier to manage than letting that branch off into a full-fledged story in its own right that just takes you totally off the rails of the original timeline. So this is, I think, the reason why stories in video games that have an open world structure or a branching narrative structure like this really struggle to tell compelling stories, because it's just a matter of managing all the outcomes and resolving them in a way that's satisfying. And that just becomes exponentially more difficult and more time consuming the more choices that you give.
Yeah.
And it starts off with a simple choice, this or this. But from there, they branch off into this or this. And then those branch off, and it just grows like crazy into something you can't control anymore.
One of the things that Breno26, talking about Breath of the Wild, he said that it needed a stripped back story. I imagine they thought the confusion of the memories could fit in with the amnesia theme with Link. The problem that you're referring to, that in Breath of the Wild, Link can go wherever he wants to, and that creates so many problems with the web of storytelling. And the way that they fixed that was, you just have a couple memories that hint at a greater story, and you don't know when those memories happened, but that's fine because your character has amnesia. So it's he's getting his memories back, and he doesn't even know what order they go in or when things happen, right? But he slowly remembers stuff, and you go through the game, and that's the way that they chose to deal with the problem of not actually being able to weave an intricate story into an open world game. Right. Not just open world, but literally open air or whatever they call it, open everything.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want.
Right.
And you still kind of have a story. But there is an element of you can't really have both.
Yeah. Yeah. So what a lot of games will try to do, you can kind of see this branching narrative graph here showing all the points reaching the several different resolutions. What a lot of companies will do to try and mitigate that is a parallel narrative where you can make a choice, but those choices will eventually just kind of converge into the same plot point.
Yeah, instead of going out, then they come back in. Yeah.
And that generally I feel doesn't tend to sit well with people. When you're trying to give them the illusion that they can make choices and take the story in their own direction and really role play, if you end up forcing them back into the same story beat anyways, that tends to feel cheap to people. It feels like you're not really giving them a choice. And if you're going to tell your story under the pretense that the player can choose, but then not really let them choose, I think that's only going to lead to disappointment. And this is essentially exactly what happened with Mass Effect 3. And the reason why Mass Effect 3 was such a huge, like, debacle with the fans and why they were so disappointed. Because they gave this promise in the previous games of all these different ways this could resolve, and you could take your character in the way that you saw fit and the way that you wanted to play it out. But they essentially just boiled all of their different choices down to 3, and people did not like that. So you have to be really careful, I think, with how you present it in your marketing and in what you're promising in the setup of the story.
Because you can't blame them. They couldn't have really done what you thought they were going to do.
Yeah.
But you thought they were going to do it because they kind of led you to believe that they could do it, and they can't. Yeah.
And I don't want to say they can't. It's just like, do you want to take 20 years to make a game?
Okay, they can, but yeah. So you know what I mean? If you took 20 years to make a game, it would come out on the N64 today.
It's just like, I guess you are right to say that you can't do that, right? Because of what you just said.
Well, you need AI, or you can't. It's just hard for one person to do that.
Start a development for a certain console's life cycle and take the amount of time it would take to really plan all those 20, 30 endings out or whatever it is in the lifespan of that console. You'd have to then
in 6 years
do all the work it would require to update your assets, and then by that time it's just like you're constantly behind the ball because the technology is increasing and you're having to keep up with that, but like you're still kind of planning out, and eventually it just becomes unsustainable. I think you guys should read this for those of you who are interested. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it makes a lot of really good points. But there's another graph here towards the bottom that I thought was really interesting. Just a hand-drawn sort of like outline of the story, right? Has the house and the office, and then just all these ways it can branch and flip back onto itself, and
I see that,
and then move over from the house into the office, and all these. It just becomes so complicated, and the more complicated something is, the easier it is to make a mistake, and to not account for something, and then find a plot hole, and then you'd have to screen that past a lot of different people who have different perspectives or play in a different way to really catch those things. And just the amount of time and effort and the amount of people needed to really like cross all your T's and dot all your I's and really put a cap on that and make it really, really excellent is insane. Comparatively to just writing a linear story. The classic beginning, middle, and end. And this is the character, and this is what the character does next, and that leads to this.
What's funny, though? This chart that you're looking at right now, it really only details like 3 separate choices.
Yeah.
That the person makes, whether or not to do this thing, and then whether or not to use a certain tone. This isn't, when you play it all through in your head, this is not that complex. It really isn't compared to what, people do in just a few minutes in a day. This is nothing.
And this is just based
insane. On... It's freaking insane.
It's just based on a couple of choices you might encounter, like the beginning of something. It's not even like a fully fledged out, like epic story on the level of something like Mass Effect, right? Like,
see, that would be like 100 of these or more. That would be like 1,000 of these. Who in their right mind could possibly keep track of all that?
Manage all that, especially by yourself. Impossible. This is where I think the answer to this is all in. Remember, we had Emily Short on our podcast.
It's all
and talking about how the AI can compute responses and make changes on its own. The computer sort of like evolving and making logical choices about what would happen in response to what the player chooses to do, versus the writer, the story's writer. The writer, in that sense, would just create a setting in which here is the world, here is who's in charge of this world, it's all the background. what the player would enter, and the computer would make logical sort of like alterations to what happens depending on the input the player gives it. That's really the only way I can see a truly open world story unfolding in a way that could be satisfactory.
And a critique of that would be it's not very artistic.
Yeah.
But is it realistic? Yes.
Sure.
It would be so realistic, but it would not be very artistic, because
the art would be simply in the design of the universe, not in the storytelling.
Not in the actual storytelling, or even the dialogue to some extent. It's written by a computer.
Yeah. So, in any case, trying to find a balance, I think, in the meantime, because we're still a ways away from anything like that becoming a reality. But in the meantime, I think that the answer is that truly open world is probably not the best place to tell a compelling story. Yeah. It is a good place for people to go in and sort of just like mess around and have fun. And you'll notice that like some of the best material content online that came out of Breath of the Wild were people figuring out the craziest ways to propel themselves across the map.
Smashing a rock and then jumping on it and having it like
fly over there, or the creative ways they came up with for killing certain bosses without using a sword or a weapon, you know.
Yeah.
That to me is where the real value of Breath of the Wild was in people taking the tools that they were given and creating their own way of interacting with the world. And that, I think, if you enjoy that, Video Game Donkey is a great channel if you like that kind of thing, because that's almost what he seeks to do. He's trying to find some creative, cool way to play it. He's playing Overwatch, and he's not playing it with the team to go for the goal. He's playing it trying to find the craziest way he can think of to kill someone, or the most inventive way possible to get across that map and knock somebody off. If that's what you like to do when you play video games, Breath of the Wild is a gold mine for you.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a tailored artistic experience that delivers a solid, like well thought story, truly open world like this is not the place to find that. So is there somewhere in between where you can find that? I think that the answer is yes. I think that Mass Effect, up until the fact that they decided at the end that they're going to kind of converge into 3 storylines, like Mass Effect 1 and 2 were marvelous. Really, really well told stories, extremely captivating, and they gave that illusion of choice, right? So you feel like you're role-playing. You feel like you have a choice in it. Of course, you don't really. All of these branching paths have been planned and laid out and designed, but you can kind of feel like it's a simulation of role-playing. You can't ever role-play quite the same way as you will in a D&D session where the DM has got to sort of like on the cuff now, like, design something based on the crazy thing you decided to do,
which is what the AI would do,
right? Which is what the computer eventually will be able to do. The computer will. That's a great point. The computer will eventually become the DM of the game you're playing, and the designers will have created the maps, the world, the lore, the structure, but the AI is going to be your dungeon master while you're playing the game.
That's a good way to think of it, actually.
While you're playing the dungeon master, the computer dungeon master will sort of like create scenarios for you based on the choices that you're making. That's where real role-playing will finally be possible in video games. And some pretty compelling stories will come out of that, and some very, very whack stories will come out of that where people are just trying to test the limits of the AI's ability to
oh my gosh,
think
they're
on the cuff.
going to create... People are going to go crazy when AI gets implemented and stuff like that, because AI can pretty easily be prodded and goaded into like making like racist statements. It's like your kids are going to buy this game. They're just messing around like crazy. And eventually the game has created like this oppressive tyrannical regime.
Emily Short actually talked about that a bit. The challenges there, right? Certainly.
That was great. You guys should go back and watch that podcast.
Yeah.
Can't remember which one it was. But.
You can, for those of you, don't go on YouTube and search it. You have to go to the channel and go to the playlists. Click on the playlist and go to the podcast playlist, and then you'll be able to find it there. But maybe I'll leave a link to it in the description of this video as well for people who want to just go look at it.
Because I think that's super relevant. Very interesting stuff they're doing.
But anyways, there are games that do this to some extent that I think do it very well. I think Mass Effect 1 and 2 did it well. I think that The Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 does it very, very well. But again, with The Witcher 2, for instance, right? You play the opening scenario esque of the game. You come to a very important choice. Are you going to side with Roach, or are you going to side with Yorvith, the elf? And from there, you have 2 different games now. You go with Yorvith into a different area of the world, and you have a whole different set of story beats that happen there, and characters and events. Or you go with Roach, and you go a totally different way. And see, you've now made 2 games. You've forced yourself into making 2 games into one. And the player is not, unless they replay the game, is going to miss out on half of the game.
That's crazy.
See, and even if you have, so let's say you did follow Mass Effect 3 all the way to its logical conclusion with 16 different endings, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Your player plays it once, they get 1/16, essentially, of the resolution of that story. And how do you justify all the time and effort that goes in and resources that go into asset creation and everything into creating 16 different endings that most players will see 1, maybe 2 of them. They won't play all 16 to the, you know what I mean? It's just like, how do you justify that? It just feels like a waste.
Right. You're paying you're especially to like your investors or whoever's funding this game to be like, hey, we're putting this much money into asset creation for this place that 1/16 of the players might actually go to. It's like they're not going to go with it. They'll be like, why do we narrow down your storylines? Don't make that many.
Exactly. We have CapDoc here says it can't be understated how interesting Way of the Samurai manages to tackle multiple branching paths with genuinely different scenarios made possible by that single town small sandbox direction. I've not played Way of the Samurai. Now I'll have to check it out just to see what you're talking about.
CapDoc made a few comments earlier saying the Way of the Samurai series centering themselves on single locations gives them room for the player to go on multiple story paths that are significantly different from each other from beginning to end. It's interesting.
I'll have to look into Way of the Samurai. I haven't played any of them. So, DJ Granblue, you think Anthem will be able to capture what Mass Effect did well with the story? I don't. I actually don't have a lot of faith in BioWare right now. Ever since the acquisition from EA. Well, you know, like Mass Effect 2 was fine, but actually, was Mass Effect 1 created after the acquisition from EA? Anyway,
I don't remember.
Mass Effect 1 and 2 were fine. Mass Effect 3, I think was
Mass Effect
also...
was EA.
Mass Effect 3, aside from its original sort of debacle, and the fact that it does feel cheap, that the 3 endings, they did do a good job in some of their DLC to sort of give the resolution to characters that they were looking for. I think the first 3 Mass Effect games, even though the third one is significantly weaker, were really good. But anything they've made since then is just not even close, in my opinion. The way that Dragon Age sort of trended, especially with the second one. But... I don't know. I just think that this is a cycle that I see happen far too often. You have a brilliant developer who creates like a whole portfolio of really excellent work, and they become known for something in particular. I think BioWare, with its sort of this sort of branching path storytelling, they became very good at that with Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, and a number of other games. And Mass Effect sort of like carried that through to its peak, in my opinion. Then a huge corporation comes in and sees the success garnered by that studio. They buy them out, and they start dictating all kinds of things that essentially ruin it. It just becomes too corporatized, too formulaic, and lots of things like nonsensical microtransactions that sort of like change the balance of the game, like in Shadows of War. You know, I loved that first Middle Earth game, Shadows of Mordor.
Yeah,
thought that was great. I think that was also WB at the time, but they were obviously smaller. They were taking less risks. There wasn't as much money put into that, and they sort of let them do their thing. And then when it was like, ooh, that was a huge success, then when they're kind of putting a lot of money into something like that, that's when you start to see the bullcrap streaming into it. And this is what really concerns me about Ninja Theory, because Ninja Theory cut their teeth by being an outsourced studio to work on big AAA titles, let's say like DMC. A lot of people didn't like DMC, but with they did Heavenly Sword, which I thought was really good. And they then, of course, did Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And now they've been bought out by Microsoft. And the trend there is that eventually Microsoft will dictate all the decisions and will just really flood out and just destroy the artistic side of the decisions being made by the studio, and it just won't be the same. So no, I don't have any faith that BioWare will ever recapture sort of what they had in the past. But
me neither. This actually happened. I love Korean dramas, right? I watch Korean TV all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a website called dramafever.com, and great website, had a ton of Korean dramas. They were doing really big stuff. About 3 years ago, they got bought by WB, I believe.
Mm.
And at first I was like, oh, this is cool because it's an American company that's recognizing that Korean media is like super big and popular, and they're getting into it, and that's going to secure Drama Fever's future, right?
Mm.
But if you go to dramafever.com right now, you get this message that says, thank you for 9 great years. As of October 16th, Drama Fever has shut down. It is done forever. And that's bullcrap. They were doing really well. They were funding their own dramas. They were like probably the biggest site that people could go to in America to watch Korean television. And it was awesome. And some big company came in, tried to change things, screwed it up, and now they're gone forever. And it's like, this happens everywhere. It's not just video games. Big companies come in and they think they can make money off of it. And sometimes they can, and sometimes they just screw it up.
This is the reason why this happens, right? Before a company goes public, right? Like they have pretty much all the say in what they make, what they're creating, and how it's done.
Yeah, there's no board. There's
the shareholders, not the shareholders, the partners of the business, the people who own it. They are the ones making the decisions at the top.
Yeah,
the executives,
the executive board. Yeah.
Then, when a company goes public, they get all the funding they need. The idea is, if only I had this much money, which we're never going to come up with strictly on the profit of the business. If I had this much money, then I'd be able to do this, 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 and this. And it's like, that's where going public comes in. You get all these shareholders, and now you have all the money, all the funds that you need to do everything that you had imagined you wanted to do. And let's say even your first one is a huge success, and it makes tons of money, and all your shareholders are happy. The issue comes in the fact that it's in publicly traded in that space where when your company goes that big, the expectation is always year over year that you will grow more,
make more and more money,
and more and more. And no matter how successful your first thing was, the second one is expected to be bigger and make even more money, and then that's more people are going to buy stock. And
otherwise, no one's going to fund your projects.
Yeah. If without more people buying stock, the company doesn't grow. The value of the company doesn't grow. So you have to have it get even bigger and bigger and bigger, and you will always eventually reach a ceiling. People get fatigued. Whatever comes up, we've seen this before. Yeah. Then the company goes, "Oh, we're not selling as much as we were. What are other ways we can monetize this and run it as far as we can take it until people say, no more, this is bullcrap, I'm done," and then they shut it down, like Kaysen just read from that website. That is the cycle of how this works. As soon as you go public, that is what you can expect to see probably over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. It's very rare for companies to survive longer than that. The ones that do, they find ways to innovate. They give their creative people more room to really come up with new stuff. I think of companies like Nintendo. Like, they don't do the safe thing a lot of times with their hardware development. And that's kind of like the entire identity of the company. And people who are buying in hopefully understand that when they do that, right? And so they're allowed to take some risks and do some stuff that you wouldn't expect, which is why you get the Wii and then you get freaking the Switch, which is just like, that's not the way the competitors were going. That's not necessarily the safe route. That could have failed, and the company, but only the companies that do that are the ones that stick around, or they get so big that they just monopolize everything and they buy everyone out, like Disney. And
well, even like Facebook and Apple, like when Facebook bought Instagram, that was like freaking crazy. And it's like, that was supposed to be a competitor that was going to make Facebook better. And instead Facebook's like, I'm buying you. And then it's like, and then Facebook owns like Oculus Rift and all these other weird things too that they're trying to do with video games. And I think they screwed up Oculus Rift. I really do.
Oh yeah.
That thing was like on its way. Facebook bought it years and years and years later. It's like, it's a thing, but it's not really what people thought it was going to be.
Yeah. But I mean, anyway. you will, I guarantee you will see this trend with everything.
Everything, yeah.
Anything
that can make money. Anything that's profitable will be exploited to its maximum.
Yep. And as soon as it starts losing money in any shape or form, you'll start to see some really BS tactics to try and milk it for all it's worth until it's run completely dead and into the ground. And so the moral of the story is, if you're a game developer or whatever, you have a company, and you want to maintain the artistic integrity of that company, don't go public. Do not go public. Yeah. Keep it. Realize that you're never going to be a billionaire, and that's okay. You don't have to be a billionaire to make a living and to get by and to do what you love.
To do what you love, exactly.
You don't have to be a billionaire to do that. Keep your artistic integrity. Keep the thing the way it's supposed to be. Satisfy your customers, and don't cop out. But a lot of people can't resist that. As soon as they see that kind of money, it's hard to walk away from it. I don't blame them. That's a lot of money. But that's what happens. All right. Let's move on into our community stories and finish this off. We have one I don't know what to call it. It's a cover. It's a musical cover, piano cover of a song from Saga Frontier 2. This comes from Melchior Blade. I will, again, link in the description. I'm going to sample it here for just a second. I won't go through the whole thing. Just want to play it. This comes from Melchior Blade. It's Tobel, the original composer, Masashi Hamauzu, B's composer, Final Fantasy 13, World of Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 10, done a lot of stuff. Anyways, he did the Saga series as well. Saga Frontier 2, piano cover, here it goes. It's so pretty. I just don't even want to stop it. Very, very nice though. Mix or cover there from Melchior Blade. Link will be in the description again. Subscribe. Tell him to do more piano covers. But But yeah, it's lovely. I really like it. Good job there, Melchior Blade. Okay. Then we have a couple of questions to finish us off here. These will be kind of quick. First one comes from Daniel Imperial on Patreon. Or actually, sorry. First one comes from Daniel Burnham on Patreon. What's your current reading list? What are some of the best books you've read over the past year that you would recommend to listeners? So, I haven't read a ton, actually over the last couple years, because we've been working on the channel and doing a bunch of other stuff. So this is why I wanted to start book club in the first place, was so that I could get back into reading again. But one book that I did read was Childhood's End, earlier this year. I've become a very big fan of oh shoot, dang it, getting his name. Hold on. Arthur C. Clarke. I found it before I looked it up. Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. Their science fiction novels are, I really, really like them quite a bit. I think we lost Kaysen. I think he's frozen. Anyways, I read a lot of their novels a couple years ago. I read 2001. I read Rendezvous with Rama. Got to Childhood's End this year, but then I also read Foundation, I, Robot, a couple others from Asimov, and fascinating stuff. But Childhood's End, I would definitely recommend for anyone, especially on this channel, who likes Xenogears, because Xenogears was heavily inspired by Childhood's End. It's a very short read. You can get through it really quick, but just really, really fascinating original sort of like concept that he works with in that one. And so that's one that I read recently that I really liked. But since we are doing book club now, there's a whole list of books. I mean, I don't even know where I would start with this. We'll see if I can pull it up and name some of the ones we have on there. A lot of these are, of course, science fiction, fantasy, but there are some outside of that too. One that Kaysen's going to mention here in a minute. What was the book? I keep forgetting the name of it.
By Fyodor Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment.
Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
Crime and Punishment. That's one that I think we're going to read really soon in book club.
That's great.
We're going to read Mistborn, The Final Empire next, and then after that we're going to go to Crime and Punishment, I think, next after that. But we have, as a list of things that people have suggested that they'd like covered, Rendezvous with Rama, Necronomicon?
Necronomicon.
Necronomicon.
The Necronomicon. It's like the Book of Flesh. It's like the Satan book or whatever.
Right. Yes. Vampire Hunter D, Blue Moon Rising, Pawn of Prophecy, The Gunslinger, Deathstalker, Neuromancer, Foundation, Malazan, The Lies of Locke Lamora, The Fool's Assassin, Metro 2033, which is actually, I have a video game based on that, Red Mars, Night Angel, Childhood's End, 2001, Space Odyssey, Cloud of Sparrows, which is a historical fiction, I think, or maybe not even fiction, it might just be historical. About samurai, I think. The Mistborn series, Warbreaker, the Stormlight Archives, The Name of the Wind, The Long Price Quartet, I, Robot, The Silmarillion, of course, The Name of the Wind, Dune, The Road, Ender's Game, Game of Thrones. I would throw in a couple of other, like The Magus and The Collector and The French Lieutenant's Woman, all from... I'm so bad with names. Why? Why is this a problem for my brain? John Fowles. John Fowles writes those. And then some Cormac McCarthy novels to throw in there too. A few of them like that I'm really interested in. Well, I've already read the one the movie was based on, that won Academy Award. No Country for Old Men.
No Country for Old Men, yeah.
But then there's also one, A Child of God, that I've been interested in looking into. Several others from McCarthy. So we'll be reading all of those at some point in the future on book club, so you can look forward to that. How about you, Kaysen? Books you've read?
Lately, I haven't read a ton, but lately I did read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley recently. That one was really cool. I read The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And that was crazy. It's all about, well, the subtitle of Righteous Mind is like why good people are divided amongst like politics and religion and stuff like that. And it's really cool stuff. I like stuff like that. But I kind of like Mike, I haven't really gotten the opportunity to read all that much in the past year myself.
It's time sink.
So I've only really read a couple of books.
I'll throw 1984 on there.
Yes, Orwell. Read as much Orwell as you can.
Orwell's a beast.
Yeah, and the Road to Wigan Pier.
That book in 1984, when I read it the first time, I was so conflicted at the end of that. Like, I got what Orwell was saying, and I didn't necessarily disagree with his conclusion about like the nature of human beings and sort of like with enough pressure applied, you will essentially like lose all of your morals and principles and just do what it takes to protect yourself. But part of me just did not want to believe that that's true.
Yeah, it's not optimistic.
I wrestled with it for a while after reading
Sure.
it. It's a great book, but I wasn't sure that I was ready to accept his conclusions.
Yeah. Well,
probably should read it again soon.
Time, I mean, he wrote that book like 70 something years ago. And as time has moved forward, a lot of his predictions are pretty dang astute and very correct. And we've seen a lot of them implemented in terms of the way human societies just kind of tend in that direction. But a lot of other things are like, I think he was a little more pessimistic than he needed to be.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of progress and a lot of maintaining of democracy and such in ways that he didn't think was possible.
Well, it's long past 1984, and we haven't devolved into that yet. So.
We aren't that yet. So at the very least, he was wrong about the timing. We'll see what happens in the next 50 years.
Anyways, we'll probably read that in book club eventually as well.
Yeah.
Wise man Matos says, I don't have patience to read 1984. Animal Farm was enough. Yeah, I mean,
Animal Farm it's a good like pretend 1984. It's a good like short version. The poor man's 1984.
Okay, thank you for that, Daniel Burnham. Last question for today. Outside of The Witcher, what stories do you guys find best explore morality? Well,
and this is where I came in with Crime and Punishment. Like,
yes, go ahead and talk about
probably better than any book I've ever read. It takes, and specifically Dostoevsky. He was a contemporary of Friedrich Nietzsche, right, the great German philosopher, and Nietzsche was contending that, Nietzsche is kind of like one of the philosophical founders of what eventually is now become like nihilism, but not necessarily. It's just he kind of laid the groundwork and people took it and ran with it. But a lot of his observations were that, that morality is relative. And Dostoevsky kind of took that and ran with it and determined that if humans can somehow manufacture their own meaning, which is something Nietzsche said would need to be done in the absence of religion, then what happens when people have every reason in the world to do something terrible and can justify it? Is there still some part of the human spirit that says, no, you shouldn't have done that, that was wrong, even if you're pretending that can't exist, that there is no divine spark in humans, right? There is no nature that can't be overcome by the mind. And Dostoevsky puts forth this scenario of a guy who, and he ends up killing his landlord, because his landlord is just so awful and just such a mean person, and it was so easy to do, and he just kind of went and took a hatchet and just killed her and left. And everyone hated her. He did the town a favor, really, the way Dostoevsky kind of paints the picture. But somehow this person, based on what they've done, just tortures himself to no end after doing that, despite the fact that he completely rationally, I don't know if I should spoil the whole thing, but he rationalized it perfectly in his mind, and he tried to create his own meaning to what life can be. And in the end, he couldn't actually do that. Like his mind, his body, his spirit would not allow him to actually do something like that and continue living a normal life. He was tortured for the rest of his life, and the way the book kind of goes in the future, I guess I shouldn't spoil the whole thing, but it's a direct like contention with a lot of Nietzsche's philosophies, saying, hey, this may not be as easy as you think. And it was very astute and a very good like moral landscape kind of discovery kind of thing. I thought it was a really good exploration of morality.
I'm stoked to read that now.
Yeah.
I think I'm making the call. After we read Mistborn, we're reading Crime and Punishment.
Let's do it.
So look forward to that.
It's another long one, but you know.
And then we'll get back to The Witcher, not the next month, because the next month viewers will vote, and then after that, we'll get back to The Witcher again.
Okay, cool.
All right, that is it, fellas.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining our podcast. We appreciate you guys. Again, if you want to reach out, share your work with us so that we can share it on the Community Stories segment, do that. If you're making a game, you write music, write a novel, I don't know, anything you're working on, send it to us.
Let us know.
So we can share it and send some people your way. And of course, those of you on Patreon, well, I'm getting back into probing for questions every week, so we'll get that to replace the Community Stories section. If we don't have anyone sending us their work, we'll do community questions from Patreon. So anyways, we got book club on Tuesday. We'll finish up The Last Wish, and then we'll get started on Mistborn, The Final Empire. And we should have a new video for the channel in the coming days or weeks as well. A couple of good ideas. I just finished up Suikoden, so I will be able to I'll be able to do my retrospective review on Suikoden in the next month or so, next few weeks. Case is back.
I'm back to say goodbye.
Any parting words?
I have no parting words other than be excellent to each other and party on.
I gotta watch that movie again. I actually purchased it because I think you froze again. Holy crap. I'm gonna end this now while we're ahead. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great weekend. Peace out.
Peace.
Thank you.